Yes, good morning and welcome to this edition of Citizen Extra this Monday with me, Fred Indimuli. Now, as the country continues to come to terms with the sudden death of Cabinet Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government, Major General Joseph Nkaissery, early Saturday morning, focus now shifts to his successor, Fred Matiang'i. 28 days to the elections, Matiang'i finds himself with the onerous task of ensuring that the country's security apparatus is well prepared and able to handle the elections. Now, Matiang'i can definitely count on public confidence given his performance in the education docket, but questions linger. Is there a risk that this new task could water down the achievements Matiang'i made in reforming the education sector? On the political front, the judiciary now finds itself in unfamiliar territory with the ruling party Jubilee now accusing the courts of working with NASA to derail the elections. What does such an accusation against an independent arm of government portend? What effect does casting aspersions on the independence of the judiciary potentially have? What should the courts do to appear neutral during these politically charged times? Meanwhile, IEBC this week reluctantly embarks on a process of complying with last Friday's court ruling on procurement of presidential ballot papers. The Commission has today invited all presidential candidates to a consultative meeting on that matter. Chairman Wafula Chebukati, however, insists that the Commission will appeal the ruling, obligating the electoral agency to ensure public participation in the procurement process. Also happening today, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission is today set to release a new pay structure for the public service. Over 700,000 state officers will be affected by this new salary regime, including the elected officials that will come from the elections in August. In studio this morning, I'm privileged to have three political analysts, Professor George Wajakoya, Charles Munyui, and John Ndeda. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome. In a short while, we'll be embarking on these discussions with the three gentlemen. But first, our reporters are on the ground. We do have Hassan Mugambi on standby at the Lee Funeral Home. He'll be giving us an update on the events surrounding the death of CS Joseph Nkaissery. We also do have John Wanyama all the way in Eldoret, who will be updating us on the nurses' strike, the lecturers' strike, as well as the security situation there and political situation. We'll also be trying to link up with Laura Otieno all the way in the lakeside city of Kisumu. Let's start off with Hassan Mugambi. Very good morning to you, Hassan. We do understand that the post-mortem on the body of the late CS Joseph Nkaissery is meant to take place today. Any happenings at the Lee Funeral Home as we speak?
Well, thank you very much, Fred. Yes, it is going to be taking place today. Whether or not it has already started is something that we are trying to establish here, but we have already seen the teams that are slotted to be part of that particular very important autopsy that the whole country right now is looking at, because we have seen detectives of the homicide wing of the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, and they were here complete with their dust coats and everything, just to get in to collect a few samples here and there for their forensic investigation. The autopsy is expected to be conducted by a team of pathologists, including pathologists who will be representing the family of Joseph Nkaissery and the government pathologists as well, as just to establish the exact cause of death. Remember, the cause of death of the former Cabinet Secretary Joseph Nkaissery has really brewed a lot of questions. We yesterday attended funeral service at his current home here in Nairobi, and a very close relative of his, who is also a cousin and a former MP, Ole Marima, just took to the podium and enumerated the kind of questions that the family is having right now on who exactly could be having a hand in the death of the general, saying that he actually was a very fit person, and it could not be, it is very unnatural of him to just get up off his bed and collapse and subsequently pronounced dead. There are some of the questions that they're being asked here and there, and then again the relatives are also saying that there should be a very open inquiry into his death that will tell the Kenyans across the country just just waiting to hear what exactly transpired, so that they can get a clear picture of whether indeed it was a natural cause of death or someone had a hand in it. Remember, we will be seeing that, and of course the probe is supposed to formally take flight today, because some 10 individuals, including waiters at the Bomas of Kenya and medical officers at the current hospital, have been interviewed by police, but that they have not formally recorded statement. According to sources close to the investigation, they were waiting first for the autopsy results so that they can now start formally recording statements of those that were close to the cabinet secretary moments before his death. In Dimuli.
Well, thank you, Hassan Mugambi, there live from outside the Lee Funeral Home, where the an autopsy on the body of the late CS for Interior, Joseph Nkaissery, is expected to be conducted today. Of course, his death and the probable cause of death making for the main headlines this morning on all the dailies and even other news outlets. Of course, we do not want to delve so much into that particular issue, but we will still be talking about matters surrounding his death. And one of those discussions has to do with his successor, Fred Matiang'i, the CS for Education, now also in charge in acting capacity as a CS in charge of Interior and Coordination of National Government. Gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, Professor George Wajakoya, John Deda, and Charles Munywer with me in studio. Gentlemen, of course, Fred Matiang'i, we're not saying is not up to the task. But did you expect, was it rather obvious that once that position needed to be filled, and within short notice that yes, that Fred Matiang'i was the obvious choice? Let's start with you, Professor.
Yeah, thank you very much. And first of all, I'd like to send a message of condolences to the family of the late minister. The late minister was a close friend of mine, as pictures in my Facebook can show. He was a tough, skilled operator. He was a military guy. He was a commander in whatever he did, and on top of that also, he had a very, very sensitive portfolio, the intelligence. For one to manage that portfolio appropriately, you must work in cohort with the National Security Intelligence, of which I worked with. Now, coming to Matiang'i, Matiang'i has done a very good job. That has also demonstrated in this country that we have so many talents who, when they are given an opportunity, they can excel. And we have such talents still in waiting. Now, when it comes to him replacing the minister, the late minister, I would rather say that it's not going to be business as usual. This is not a docket that can be handled with somebody without military skills, with somebody without police skills, without somebody with the intelligence training, intelligence background. It's a very, very tough docket. And if it goes to the West, if we go in the West, you'll find out that the defense portfolio in the United States, the defense or interior portfolio is always given to somebody with military background, somebody with experience, somebody who has been out there and has seen where the rubber hits
and in your own view, Matiang'i does not have this kind of experience? I
don't think whether Matiang'i will be in a position to manage this particular docket, because I've worked in the security system, and I can tell you for sure that it's not a docket that you can just mess up with. Because, one, if you look at the police department has been manhandled for a very long time by people who have no police background, people who do not know what a police officer goes through. And there have always been a holistic kind of condemnation of the police force, whereby if you give a position to a civilian like the one which was given to Kavuludi, you will take a police officer as an enemy. But since the general took over this power, he raised the level of confidence in the police was very, very high, because he understood the police problems. He understood what they go through, because he has actually gone through it.
Yes. Do you agree with Professor George Wajakoya that probably Fred Matiang'i was not the best choice for this particular job?
I don't, but let me start by relaying my message of condolences to the family and pray that God gives the family strength to deal with this humongous loss, and the country too. Having said that, I think Matiang'i has performed, and more importantly, much as the CS Interior and Internal Security included, is about the personality. I think we have seen a deliberate effort on the part of the Jubilee government to work on the security organs, to provide motivation for police officers, including even insurance and all these perks that we are talking about, better housing. I think it's more of like you're saying, it's more holistic than just the individual. But having said that again, I think Matiang'i, the education docket was a very, very critical docket. If you look at the number of investors in that line, especially the private universities that are there, and the interests that are there, you know, very, very huge. But he managed to rein in on this particular ministry, and I think it's becoming now clear and clearer that anybody who wants to have a degree, it must be a genuine degree moving forward. And it's a very short time that he's been in that ministry. So moving into the Ministry of Interior, and specifically matters security. This is a gentleman who, number one, much as he does all these things, he commands respect, and number two, he commands following, because people believe in him in terms of delivering on what he sets out to deliver. I don't think he's going to beat up the police and do all those things. I think he's going to be more of an individual who works with what is there to ensure that he gets the best out of the individuals.
What about what Professor says, that probably that docket needs someone with some bit of experience in the disciplined forces, probably previous history in the police or the military for that matter?
But we have had all those individuals again in the past, and we had a problem with the police. You remember, since independence, if you look at the individuals who've been running that particular ministry, in one way or the other, they have that particular experience. And I think a lot of Kenyans have been complaining that most of them have not been performing. Corruption in the police force has been up there. So I think, to me, it's more of a policy issue, and especially the individual as a top, you know, standing firm and being firm like Matiang'i has been firm. It cannot be said it's just an individual that has experience in this, because it might not be the experience that we need. It might be over and above the experience. We need someone who will be firm and make decisions that are in line with the policy that is being set by the national government on on issues security. Yes,
John Deda, I'd like to bring you into this conversation. Do you agree with Professor Ajakoya's assertion that that job needs someone with experience in disciplined forces, that someone probably was served as a police officer before or in the military?
I do agree that it really needs experience, because it is a very sensitive docket, particularly at this moment in time. But at the same time, you'd look at it from the perspective of, you know, you need a person in an acting capacity, being interior and coordination. We have activities going on in this country, like the under-18 World Championships, that need that internal coordination from, you know, a senior person, and you wouldn't allow that vacuum to come in at this moment in time when the whole world is watching us. So the president really needed to fill in that gap in an acting capacity. So I do agree that it needs experience, but at these special circumstances, you would need someone to act in that.
And John, do you think that it was rather obvious that Matiang'i would be the obvious choice when the president was called upon to fill that position in short notice?
When you look at the performance of ministers, you would try to look at the performance in terms of you know, delivery within a very short period of time. And Matiang'i has been touted as the Magufuli of this country. So you'd want someone who can bring in that rapid change, and looking at the political calendar, you'd want someone who can make sure the country can settle and you know, just silence the anti-sentiment that, you know, we've lost a leader, but who is the best to step in an acting capacity. So it just tends to silence the anti-sentiment that he is a performer. At the same time, he can coordinate things, and you can see he already swung into action by initiating curfews in the country.
Looking at it, because it's 28 days to the elections, of course, the security docket is one of those very major duties under Matiang'i now. And security is something very sensitive during this time, 28 days to the elections. As Ndeda says, perhaps Matiang'i, with what he is known to do, to bring and effect change within such a short time. But is it change that we need right now, rather the stability, the assurance that yes, everything will go on as planned, there will be no major change heading to the elections? Isn't that what we need, Professor?
Right now, to be honest, and I'll agree with what Ndera said on Nahulo, that for filling in the gap, yes, the president was right. We would not have operated under the vacuum. But for now, we need things to stand as they were. And I'm sure that the demise of the minister will not make any difference, because he had already set up the machinery. He had already set up the national security. There are those who are coordinating the whole system before election. So to the preparation of the elections, yes, that has been set, and it needs someone to come and take over the reins for these few remaining days. And of course, I would rather also say that this death should appeal to Kenyans to rally behind, to remember what this man did goes, so that they can actually have him rest in peace. But as far as the issue of national security towards the elections is concerned, he had already set up the mechanism, and I'm sure that his predecessor should actually carry on that task for the few remaining days. Yes, Charles?
I think, like I said, it is all systems go. You don't start preparing in terms of security for the last minute of elections. It's not just about the election day. It is pre-election, during elections, and post-election. And I want to believe, if you look at what happened just a day before, I think on the same night that the CS passed away, there was an insecurity issue in Lamu, and I think we are still dealing with it. So what needed to happen very quickly is that docket, for purposes of even the perception out there in terms of the public feeling secure, we needed someone to head that particular ministry, and it cannot be gainsaid the importance of the CA's security. So that was one of the motivations where this had to happen almost immediately. And I've heard people complaining that nobody waited. People should have waited. I don't think it was necessary to wait. There is a country to run. And there are millions of people who are relying on the presidency and his team to ensure that they are safe, and much as they are feeling very, very bad about the passing on of the CS. But I think the structures are there. The police have been organized in terms of working on security. We've seen them even when it comes to the pre-election functions, including the nominations that were happening in this country. We've seen a lot of things happening, and a lot of issues that would have arisen were stopped. We have seen terrorist activities being stemmed even before they happen. So I think, to me, it is more of the perception out there that needs to be properly, given out to the people, so that they know, much as we have lost a very, very important gentleman and a very, very serious gentleman in terms of his work, we still have a safe country, and we have the relevant structures to be able to deal with issues of insecurity in this country. In a short while, we'll be discussing about now what happens to the Education Ministry now that the CS, Fred Matiang'i, is required to run two different ministries, all very important. The examinations are coming, the national exams are coming in a few months, the elections are here. Now all this will actually stretch Fred Matiang'i's ability quite a bit. And what happens to the education reforms that he introduced? Does it mean that now that he has a lot more work, that could suffer? That we'll do in a short while, but first let's link up with our reporter Mondiwa Rose at the KICC, and it is all systems go as the State Department for Trade readies to launch crucial policy documents at the KICC. Now stakeholders in Kenya's trade industry are gathering there for the Kenya Trade Week. The theme of this year's Kenya Trade Week is transforming Kenya into a competitive-led, efficient domestic economy. A very good morning, Mumbi. What's happening there? Kindly update us. Has the event started yet?
Good morning, Fred, in the Barking studio. Yes, we are coming to you live from the Kenyatta International Convention Center, where today it marks the beginning of the National Trade Week, which is going to take place in 3 days. And today, being the launch of this event, one of the key issues that is going to take place today is that the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization is going to launch the National Trade Policy. This is a policy that the government has been pushing towards, so that to enable the country be able to compete competitively with other countries in terms of the exports and imports. So far, over the recent past, we have seen that most countries are able to export goods into the Kenyan market, but Kenya has not been able to penetrate other markets, and this is why the government wants to come up with a framework that will enable this to take place, so that Kenya can also be able to gain some. Among the key things, Fred, on this national trade policy that is expected to be launched today is the issue to do with wholesale and retail. And so far, the current situation in the country when it comes to retail has become of great concern to the government. When you look at retail supermarkets such as Nakumatt, we look at Uchumi, Tuskys, Naivas, and also the likes of Chandarana, most of them are complaining of issues to do with the operational environment, and that is why the government intends, through this policy, they're going to put up a mechanism that is going to ensure that there is no undercapitalization of the retail sector in the country, and this will be able to help retail markets going forward, and also will be able to regulate the sector so that when it comes to issues of supply, the supply of goods into the retail chains, they can be able to negotiate, and also suppliers, once they're able to supply their goods, they can be able to get their money immediately. Apart from the National Trade Policy, Fred, another thing that is expected to be launched committee, and also the Kenya e-trade portal. This is a portal that will enable people to actually know what is happening in the country in terms of commerce, and as the government continues to push for digitization, one can be able to have a one-stop shop in regards to trade. And also the other thing that will be launched today is the State Department for Trade website. So far there has been no website in the country that has to do with trade facilitation, and this is yet another platform that will be opened today. As I mentioned before, this is a 3-day conference, and the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization trying to spread out these activities within the 3 days. Apart from the launches that will take place, the 4 launches that will take place in the opening ceremony, the others will be spread with discussions in regard to retail and wholesale, and also issues to do with the export. And on matters of the National Trade Week, the theme of the Trade Week is the transforming Kenya into a competitive export-led economy, and this will enable the economy of the country to go. And as we continue with Citizen Extra, we shall be able to give you more details, because as of now the event is just about to start, where we expect the Cabinet Secretary of Trade and Industrialization, Aidan Mohammed, his peers, Chris Kipto. We also have the CEO of Front Kenya, that is Mary Luseka. We also have the CS of National Treasury, that is Henry Rotich, and also the Governor of the Central Bank, who will be here, that is Patrick Njoroge, who will be here to discuss issues in regards to trade and ensuring that Kenya's trade is able to grow. As of now, I'll take it back to you, Fred, in studio, and we shall be able to come back later with more details.
Thank you, Mombi. Mombi are there live from the KICC, where the State Department for Trade is waiting to launch crucial policy documents at the KICC, of course, ahead of the Kenya Trade Week. And of course, we'll be linking up with Mombi later on once that event kicks off for more updates from that end. Back in studio, I'm still here with Professor George Ojakoya, John Deda, and Charles Munyui. And we now want to look at what this means now that CS Fred Matiang'i has taken over in an acting capacity the Interior and National and Coordination of National Government docket. Now, what does that mean to the Education Ministry that he has been heading so ably? I'm talking this is premised on what happened in the Transport Ministry a few years back when John Mishuki was a minister, and he effected a lot of changes in that particular ministry, in the matatu industry, in the public service industry. There was a lot of progress. Then there was a cabinet reshuffle. The late Mishuki was moved to a different ministry, and within months, a lot of that progress that had been achieved in the transport industry was shed off. Yes. Now we're looking at are we looking at a similar possibility this time round? Because actually, this new docket, Interior and Coordination of National Government, could actually occupy Fred Matiang'i's time more than ever before. Charles?
I don't think so. That was a very sad moment for us when all the gains that Mishuki had brought went down the drain, simply because he was not the minister at that time. And I think if you look at Uhuru's Muigai's leadership, I think it's slightly different. These are things that are very passionate to him, that he's very passionate about. It matters education. This is something that is holding very close to his heart, and it's something that he's willing and very clear on how he's going to execute. If you look at even the oath these guys take, the cabinet secretaries, you don't take an oath to be a minister of this particular docket. You take an oath to be a minister, a CS. And that means you can be moved from this ministry, and that is why even when you have to go to another ministry, you're not revetted. And what is happening now, much as Matiang'i is handling these two dockets, let us appreciate number one, that is the CS Interior on an acting capacity. We are not sure that he's going to be confirmed in that position and someone else will be will go to education, or he will go back to the education docket. But having said that, in the event he becomes the full CS Interior, even post-election, when Jubilee wins, not if, when Jubilee wins. It's an if. Let us stick with the when for yes. Now.
We'll leave that to the very good people of Kenya to decide come August.
So in the event that happens and he retains the ministry or the interior docket, and then education is left to someone else. If you look at Jubilee's manifesto, education is one of the key issues that they are dealing with. And in terms of, this is in terms of free education, in terms of the quality of the results and the certificates that are issued by the respective institutions within the ministries. And I think nobody is going to fall back on this, because these are promises that are there even in the manifestos, and I think this is a legacy that Uhuru wants to leave, among the other things. So I don't think a lot is going to change in the education docket. The new system again is a policy issue, so I want to believe whoever becomes the CS education, assuming there are changes, he has no choice but to follow what the two gentlemen in the name of the President and Deputy have in mind in terms of this particular measure.
Well, John Beda, if Jubilee is re-elected and the President has to redo his cabinet, and probably, let's say, by then Fred Matiang'i has really proved himself in this new docket, don't you think that the President might actually confirm him in that position and then send someone else to education? And if that happens, don't you think that the Education Ministry and probably the reforms that have been effected in the education sector could actually suffer?
I do think that Matiang'i has done a lot in the education sector, and you would need a person to, institutionalize the changes and the transformations that Matiang'i has brought in. I would think the President, if Jubilee wins, that he would want to maintain that system of stability. I think the President would want to understand how stability works, that you'd want a person who would champion this, nurture this, and see the fruition of it to the end. And looking at it from the perspective of, the CS Interior, you would argue that the President would want to bring in someone else, considering this is just an acting capacity. And
but if he does prove himself in that position, then the President could actually be forced by circumstances to just say, okay, fine, I think you're best suited for this as well.
But you see, Matiang'i has also big shoes to be filled, and you would argue that he is, at this moment in time, given the fact that he's fought cartels in the education sector and he's really brought education to its reputable, we're trying to repair the reputation in the education sector. So you'd want him to hold on for a bit. You wouldn't want to bring in someone else who apparently might destabilize the system. Even though Matiang'i, being a performer, of course, can, endure and bring in the changes he's brought in from education to security, you'd argue that it would be a bit close call for the President, especially if he performs in both dockets.
Professor Ajakoya, your quick thoughts on that. What if at all Uhuru Kenyatta has to form another cabinet, if at all he wins the elections in August? Of course, Fred Matiang'i would be there, and where do you think he should be placed? If at all he performs in this new docket, do you just take him back to education again and tell him, okay, and get a new person to run this new, the interior docket?
Well, there is nothing wrong with the President using his prerogative to appoint a minister as per the Constitution. It is his prerogative right to appoint somebody, and as soon as Parliament approves, then that is it. But I'm also appealing to the President that he will be making a fundamental mistake, human mistake, by replacing Matiang'i. Matiang'i comes into two folds. Number one, if you look at the politics of unionism, politics of unionism, and I'm talking of union of teachers, is politics of the 19th, 20th century. When Margaret Thatcher took over government in the United Kingdom, the Labour Party had actually brought the British government into paralysis by giving a lot of liberties and freedoms to unions, which almost wrecked the economic development of that particular country. Matiang'i has come in with two throngs. First one, he had to deal with the unions who had cartels that were actually embedded in the ministry in terms of issues of education, issues of substandard education, whereby Kenyans who are going abroad, like in the UK, to the universities will not be admitted straight away because of the sorry business of education here. Matiang'i has done away with that. You can also see that he inherited a system that was downtrodden and rotten to the knee, whereby those embedded cartels were too much into the system that nothing was moving in terms of procurement, in terms of teacher service commission and what have you. Matiang'i has been able to neutralize the so-called unionism and brought in common sense in the ministry, and has also improved on the quality of education. The degrees from Kenya were pathetic during that particular time. There was a lot of people who would go into university and come out with a degree. Matiang'i came up and sounded a very serious warning. So it would be a fundamental mistake for the president to remove this man from that ministry. We need him, and even if the president does not win, supposing he doesn't win, whichever government comes in my opinion, should retain Matiang'i, so that we have a proper transition in education, we have a proper foundation in education, we have a proper logistic in education, so that our kids who actually graduate from the universities here, graduate from colleges here, do not come out empty-headed with the kind of all-system education that we've had.
But Charles Bunye, do you think that Matiang'i is under any pressure to try and prove to this country that he is a performer, and the same kind of reforms that he brought into the education sector, he will be tempted to do something similar in this docket, even though they need an acting capacity?
I think Matiang'i is a natural. He knows our problems, he understands our problems, and he deals with them. If you look at what he did with the Ministry of Education, it was not populist. It was what Kenyans have always wanted. It's only that they did not know how to go about getting it. In fact, even if they did know how to go about it, they knew they were not in a position to do these things. Let us not forget the executive at the national level is mainly about policy, the transformative policy agenda that Jubilee has. So I think, to me, Matiang'i is one person who looks at the situation, decides the ABC needs to be done, consults, because we have seen him consulting, and then he's on hands kind of person. So I think, to me, what he's going to do is what Kenyans have always wanted done. We know corruption at the top is there, but there is also a lot of corruption happening at the lower levels. We have seen policemen captured on television, taking bribes. I think those are the areas that are of concern to an average Kenyan, and that to me, he'll be able to rein on, and a lot of other things, at the same time, be able to motivate the police because we need them.
And that issue of corruption, because it's one of those major things that have really plagued our police service. If Fred Matiang'i decides to face corruption within the police force head-on during this next, as he serves in acting capacity, do you think that was actually stretching beyond what he can do, and probably the Ministry of Education will feel a bit neglected? John?
First of all, Matiang'i, as Charles said, is a hands-on person. He set the standards from, unlike other ministers, he's been able to set standards from the front, and I'm sure he would want to give it a hands-on approach, especially given investigative media reports, and even when they arrest policemen and cartels trying to bribe people. But having said that, corruption is a culture that has grown insidiously into the body society, and you cannot just say that you attack corruption from the point of the policeman. You also look at the culture that we have as Kenyans. That are we going to initiate that? Are we going to support him in that? Because we've always lacked that. And when you look at the laws that we have about corruption, you do realize that the enforcement has been lacking. We keep on initiating new bills and laws about corruption and about even taking care of our police force. But what about enforcement? And I think one thing that Matiang'i would want to look at is really on the enforcement side, that you want to ensure that whatever laws that are there, however little, that first of all we can implement and enforce them to curb corruption.
Professor, because the concern is the kind of applause that CS Matiang'i got and he received from the whole country simply because of the reforms he instituted in the education sector was across board. Don't you think that perhaps he'll feel a need to do something also a bit populist in this new docket so that he may receive similar applause?
That will be a fundamental mistake as well. I've been a police officer for many years. I've worked in uniform, I've worked in the intelligence. I'm a lawyer right now. I've been outside this country. I've seen how police work in other countries. I've seen the police reforms in other countries. I've seen how policemen are treated. The issue of populist approach in the Interior Ministry is more or less next to brain damaging somebody. These are very, very sensitive docket. And I would rather go outside the box and bring in an example of the late president of Zambia, who was himself a police officer. By the way, the late Sata was actually a corporal in the police. And when he took over, he knew the police needs. He did not just rush in and then be as somebody who is there to appease the public. The issue of police is very sensitive. We need to start at the grassroots. What is it that makes a police officer to take a bribe? What can we do? Can we bring in institutionalized research that will include stakeholders, plus police officers, their family, former police officers, and even the public, to find out the embedded culture of corruption? One is, do we need to pump money into the police unit? Do we need to educate them? Do we need to educate them beyond the horizon of Kiganjo CID Training School or the Intelligence College? Do we need to absorb them and impute some culture of telling them, look, we shall educate you, we shall also introduce corruption in primary schools, secondary schools, and have a content-based curriculum that will teach the environment and the people of this country that corruption is bad? Is it something that is going just to be something that somebody is just going to throw a stone in it and it ends? No, it needs a long, sensitive, career-oriented period and timing. It took almost 100 years for the police in the United Kingdom. Are you saying the kind of reforms you saw in the education sector that happened over a few months it can't happen overnight in the police? Because remember this, we have housing problems in the police. Police officers are still living in pathetic environment. Number two, police officers are paid very less in this country. Number three, they are not given incentives. Insurance only came in the other day. Number four, they are the talk of the town. Anything that happens with the police, everybody in the country is like, policeman is bad. Look at this person and the burden is carrying. If it comes to transfers, are you going to destabilize this man's family by just removing him to Nairobi to Lokchogyo with his wife and children and the truck going there? There must be a system that will make a police officer feel proud to serve in this country, give him the social available amenities, and then that problem will be resolved. But if you just come in and say, oh, let us have traffic police officers uniform without pockets, will that solve the problem?
Of course, the police service is just one, because the immigration department, security is just one of the duties under the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government. But Charles, if at all you were to advise Fred Matiang'i on his new role and what exactly he can do, because he's still doing it on acting capacity, what would you tell him?
I would remind him that every Kenyan was hoping and praying that he becomes the Interior CS. Even in an acting capacity, because they believe in him, they trust he can deliver. And the more you are elevated by the public, the more is expected of you in terms of delivery. And unfortunately, for lack of a better word to use, he came in at a time that is very, very sensitive, when we have to rein in on anything that looks like it can bring chaos to this country pre-election, during and post-election. So I'd advise him to naturally tread cautiously, appreciate that these are Kenyans, and that particular docket needs slightly more balancing than the education docket, because even the stakeholders that he's dealing with are totally diverse, and they can even sabotage him, quote unquote, in the process of executing his mandate. So I think, to me, he needs to come in, appreciate that Kenyans are expecting a lot from him, and he has no choice other than deliver, because they'll forget everything else he has done, even in the Ministry of Education, in the event he fails as of this one.
If he does fail, then we will forget his successes. Finally, John Deda, any advice to CS Matiang'i on his new role?
First of all, there's a football analogy that goes like this. You know, the best number 2 cannot make a good number 1. That he should renew his strategies. You know, much as he's a performer and he has a good track record, you wouldn't expect him to just dive in and come up with similar strategies expecting the same results. As Professor says, this is a very sensitive docket. It needs a very careful approach. And I'm sure maybe politically there will be those who would be wanting to, you know, gaining mileage in terms of his performance and things like that. But Kenyans want performance, they want security. And only a different approach would work to secure this country, especially for the many poor Kenyans who die, you know, without coverage and without much notice.
Okay. Well, time for us to take a break. When we come back, we'll be discussing the judiciary and the fact that it now finds itself in unfamiliar territory with the ruling party, Jubilee, now accusing the courts of working with NASA to derail the elections. What does such an accusation against an independent arm of government portend? What effect does casting aspersions on the independence of the judiciary potentially have? And what should the courts do to appear neutral during these politically charged times? I would like to thank Professor George Wajakoa, John Deda and Charles Munyui, for the political analysts, for helping us understand how Fred Matiang'i can and should fill the big shoes left by the sudden death of CS for Interior Joseph Kasaine Ole Nkaissery. Let's take a break. Citizen Extra continues.